Hello everyone, my name is Joris and this is my Wrath of the Lich King Unholy DK PvP guide. Some of you may know me from Warming WoW. I often stream my gameplay there on Twitch. I'll be leaving a link down in the description below if you would like to check out the stream. In this guide I will be talking about the gear, the enchants, the gems, the talents, the macros, and some of the add-ons which I use, and I will be giving more or less a rotation that you could follow. Before we get into the actual guide, I would like to say that English is not my first language, so pardon my pronunciation on certain spells. Also, this DK guide is simply to show how I play DK and my opinion on the certain aspects of the class, so this is by no means the best DK guide out there, but I hope it will be enough to help. Okay, let us start with the gear. So first of all, I play with 5 out of 5 Wrathful, most of the time at least. I play with the PvE neck, the Penumbra neck, Winding Sheet, Ashen Ring, and Might of Blight. I get asked a lot if I use Skeleton Lord, is there a difference, because this ring is kind of easier to get than Might of Blight, but there's absolutely almost no difference. I only play it because I also use STS Heroic with Shadowmourne, and these all give armor penetration, so you can reach about 30% armor pen. As for the gems, for the red and orange one I use the 10 strength and 10 resilience, and for every yellow gem I use the 20 resilience, and for the blue gems I use the Stormy Majestic Zircon. You need 4 of those to reach about 100, and then you play with the enchant on the clock, the 35 spell penetration, and you will reach the spell penetration cap for DKs, which is 130. But like this you will reach 135, which is really good, so you can never miss or resist. It will help you a lot in PvP for sure. And as for the meta gem, I use Thundering Skyflare Diamond, which gives you 450 melee haste for 5 seconds. It's really useful. There's different options that you can use. You can also change it depending on the enemy team and what comp they're playing, but this is generally good for everything. As for the sigil, I play with Vengeful Heart when I want to hit a single target, when I want to kill plates, which is usually the best option to deal damage with is Death Coil versus those classes. But also, of course, you can play with Sigil of Virulence. It gives you 200 strength for when you use Death Strike or Scourge Strike. And using this can give you more AoE damage, so this is definitely better in, for example, BGing and cleaving multiple targets. But for single target, I would say Vengeful Heart is better. As for the off parts, you kinda change them depending on the matchup. With this normal setup, I have 1070 resilience. I have 2 different sets as well. This is my normal one, which I usually play. Also, just a brief explanation about the weapon. I use Shadowmourne, it's best in slot, but if you don't have Shadowmourne, you can also use Bintroll Heroic or Glorin Heroic. Shadowmourne is definitely the best, but the other 2 are not bad at all. As for the sets, this is my normal one, as I said. You reach every cap you need with 1070 resilience. I also have a different set, the 1150, and I have one more set, the 1283. Different sets for different matchups, for different comps. Also, it's important to mention when you're playing DK, as a lot of the times in the PvP you have to switch weapons, such as the PvP weapon I use to maximize my resilience. Also, if you notice, it's enchanted with Rune of Sword Shattering. To simply explain it, I'm gonna show you what it does. It gives you, the Sword Shattering gives you 4% parry rate and 50% reduction on disarm, so it can really help you against warriors, rogues, even shadow priests when they want to disarm you so you can't kill them. So it can be really useful in many places. And as for the second enchant that you might have to switch your weapon to is the Spell Shattering. It's kind of similar to the Sword Shattering, just for casters. It gives you 4% chance to deflect spell damage and reduce the duration of silence by 50%. The first part is a bit RNG, but the second part is why you go this enchant versus casters, such as Shadow Priest Mage. The 50% silence reduction is really important. For example, as a DK, when you get silenced, you almost can't use half of your spells. The only spells you will be able to use are kind of the strikes: Scourge Strike, Blood Strike, Plague Strike, but you cannot use AMZ, you cannot use Ice Fortitude, Anti-Magic Shell, Strangulate. You cannot use those spells when you're silenced. So most of the time, versus certain comps, you would have to switch weapons. But as your main source of damage, you definitely play with your highest damage weapon, which in my case is Shadowmourne, and I go Falling Crusade enchant on it. As for the enchants on my gear, on the gloves I play with the rocket because I have Jewel Crafting and Engineering. If you don't have Engineering, you can simply use another enchant such as the Attack Power. For the legs, I play with the 40 Resilience, 28 Stamina. 40 Resilience, as I mentioned, is really important. Resilience on DK helps you a lot. For the boots, I play with 32 Attack Power. On the chest, I play with 20 Resilience. On the cloak, 35 Spell Pen. On the shoulder and the helm, I play with the Winter Grasp enchants, which both give Resilience and Attack Power, which is kind of the best enchants you can get in PvP. Okay, now let's talk about talents. In talents, I'll be mentioning the ones that you go almost always and the ones that you switch to in case of a different matchup that you don't benefit from this talent, so I want to switch it to something else. Now for the first two talents, you play with Vicious Strikes and Virulence. Those two you always take them since they increase the damage and the critical chance, so it's kind of important. Virulence, you use it because it helps you reach your hit cap, and your diseases has 30% less chance to be dispelled. By the way, it's important to mention when you play with this talent, you don't need 5% hit cap. You can simply reach about 4.23 plus and you will be hit capped. Ravenous Dead gives you 3% strength and 60% strength and stamina. You almost always go this. Unholy Command, you always go this. Morbidity gives you 15% Death Coil damage and reduces the cooldown of Death and Decay. Death Coil is basically your main source of damage, so 15% more damage is definitely something you want. As for Unholy Command, 10 seconds on grip is really useful for peeling, for setting up a kill. For many different reasons you can use this talent, so I would definitely recommend using it. It's 10 seconds, it's huge. As for Epidemic, most of the DKs use 1 point in it just to increase the dots by 3 seconds. I sometimes don't play with it if I'm facing a certain team that I play with Glyph of Diseases. If you don't know Glyph of Diseases, I will be talking about the glyphs in a bit. But what Glyph and Diseases does, it basically when you press Pestilence, it resets the duration of your dots on the enemy. As for Outbreak, you almost always go this. It increases your damage of your main 2 strikes. Corpse Explosion is one of the most essential spells you need on Unholy DK. It's such a huge chunk of burst. As for Necrosis, you almost never go this in PvP since most of the time your main source of damage will be a setup. You set up a one-shot on someone, or you grip someone behind a pillar and you try to do a burst. So 20% more damage on auto attacks is not that ideal. I didn't mention Anticipation. It increases your dodge by 5%. You can use this in duels. I used it before versus certain classes, it definitely helped, but in arenas, battlegrounds and world PvP I don't see it being as useful as Virulence and Vicious Strikes. Now Knight of the Dead and Master of the Ghouls are almost like you can't play Unholy DK without them. These are the runes that gives you your pet, and it makes your pet stay with you. Also it reduces the cooldown and your pet take less damage from AoE. And of course this one reduces the cooldown and your pet does not have a limited duration anymore. Blood Caked Blade, I get asked a lot if it's useful. In my opinion it's really good versus cloth users, priest, mages, because your auto attack can hit a lot, and since your auto attack is hitting constantly, you have a chance to proc this talent. It does a decent amount of damage. I wouldn't say it's like crucial that can win you games, but it can help. The problem with it, it's only 30%, so if you're kinda unlucky, it's almost useless. As on Pill of a Horse, you can use this talent. I see a lot of people using it in BGs. It's definitely useful. It can help you reduce the CC chain on you. Also, it increases your mount speed, but in arena you almost never play that. It's really useful if you're playing an orc DK. This talent can be really good for you because of your racial thing you get, the 15% stun reduction or around that amount. So this can help you increasing your stun duration by less, and it can help you a lot in arenas. Unholy Blight, you have to take this talent. Basically, to summarize this talent, what it does, once you use Death Coil, it puts Unholy Blight on the enemy, which means they cannot dispel your diseases for 10 seconds. Impurity, your spells receive an additional 20% damage from your attack power. It's really important because as a DK you have a lot of attack power and a lot of your spells are basically magic, so it helps you a lot. Dirge, I play it because 5 runic power for every Death Strike, Plague Strike and Scourge Strike is really a lot. If you calculate it in like a 1 minute, you get almost 80% more runic than you should usually get. It can help you a lot because your main source of damage will be Death Coils, and this gives you more runic power, which means more Death Coils. Magic Suppression and Anti-Magic Zone. Those two are, you almost play them all the time. They make your AMS, first of all, you take 6% less damage from all the magic abilities, and it increases the capacity that your AMS can, like the magic damage it can take. Anti-Magic Zone, I'll show you it right now. When you use it, you put a zone around you that reduces the magical damage by 75%. It can absorb to around 21k. This is really such a good spell in peeling your team, or you can use it yourself because this also benefits your team. As for Discretion, you always play that. You put every time you use a Plague Strike or a Scourge Strike, you put an AoE slow aura on the ground, so everyone that steps in that circle will be slowed by 50%, and it lasts for 20 seconds, which is really important. Reaping, you can use this talent in different scenarios. If you're trying to peel your team as much as possible, you can use this because you will get 2 Death Runes. Death Runes are basically a Blood or Frost or Unholy rune, so if you have 2 Blood runes, you use them. After that, when the cooldown reset, they will become Death Rune, which means you can get 2 more Chain of Ice or 2 more Plague Strike. It can be useful in certain matchups for sure. As for Ghoul Frenzy, it's kind of useful if your pet is, if you, for example, you face a comp where your pet is constantly hitting, but most of the time 25% haste is not something that like makes your pet do a one-shot or something. Also, it takes 1 Unholy Rune, which makes it a bit not very useful. It heals your pet for 60%, so versus certain teams that focus on killing your pet, you can use it, but in my opinion, it's not that useful. As for Improved Unholy Presence, it basically makes you move 15% faster, and it resets your rune cooldown by 10%, which is really important. Desolation, you kind of never use this in PvP. It's mainly a PvE talent, but I've seen some people try it. It's not so useful, it's only 5%. It's not something that like makes you one shot or something like that. It's not the best in my opinion. As for Crypt Fever, your diseases now put an extra buff on the enemy, that debuff that makes them take 30% more damage from diseases. Bone Shield, it's a huge talent. It takes 1 Unholy Rune and it gives you, I'll show you right now, you get 3 stacks of Bone Shield, so the first 3 spells that hit you are reduced by 20%, their damage dealt will be reduced by 20%. Also, there's like a hidden passive that not a lot of people know. You deal 2% more damage with all attacks and spells, which kinda can help you a bit. But the main source or reason you use this talent is the 20% damage reduction. Scourge Strike is your basically kinda the main damage source on Unholy DK. This is the strike you deal most of the damage with, not Plague, not Blood Strike, but Scourge Strike. That's your main damage. For Ebone, Plague Bringer, your Crypt Fever, which is this talent, puts a debuff on the enemy that makes them take 13% more damage to magical damage. So if you have a team that can benefit also from it, it can help a lot. But main reason you use those is to make your diseases do more damage. As for Wandering Plague, this talent is really useful for cleaving. What it does basically, it's basically when your dots proc the damage, there's almost like 80% plus chance that they do additional damage, which is, as it says here, a chance equal to your mere critical that they will cause 100% additional damage to the target, and it ignore people that are CC'd. So it can be really useful in cleaving. I use it a lot in PGs or 3v3 since you'll be hitting multiple targets. As for Rage of Revendare, your spells and abilities deal 10% more damage and increases your expertise by 5%, by your expertise by 5, sorry, not 5%. So it can be really useful. Basically the main reason you use this talent is the 10% more damage to targets that are infected with Blood Plague. Gargoyle is 3-minute cooldown. You summon a gargoyle that hits your target for 30 seconds. It's kind of your big cooldown that you use when you trying to kill someone. It's of course super important. As for the second tree, I play with Runic Power Mastery, which gives you 30 Runic. It reaches your Runic here. You see on my character, it's 130. You get more Death Coil, more chance to heal yourself with Lichborn, as I will mention in a second. As for improved Icy Touch, it makes your Icy Touch deal 15% more damage, and it reduces the enemy attack speed by 16%. It can reach to 20 if you decide to take one more point, and also it increases your attack speed while decreasing the enemy attack speed. As for Black Ice, it makes your Frost and Shadow damage deal 10% more damage, and Lichborn is such an essential talent on DK. Once you use it, you become immune to fear, to sheep, and to sleep effect, so seduce as well. You can also use it to avoid getting hexed by a shaman. So if you see a shaman casting hex on you, wait till like the very last split second, and then you can use Lichborn and you will not get hexed. The other talents, this you can use versus certain comps, not so many. Toughness, it gives you more armor and reduces the slowing effect. Can be useful in duels versus a hunter or something, but most of the time you play with those two. So you can also reach Icy Talons, which helps you a lot. For Lichborn, you can also use it to heal yourself. I will explain later in the macro how to do that. As for Endless Winter, it increases your strength by 4%, and it makes your Mind Freeze not cost any runic power. Without this talent, your Mind Freeze would cost 20 runic power, which is kinda a lot, and this talent makes it for free. So if there is a kill potential, you can, and you're next to the enemy healer, you can kick it. But let's say if you play without this talent and you don't have any runic power, you would not be able to interrupt the cast and the enemy can survive. So this talent is really good. Also it gives you 4% strength, which is kinda a lot, because it also includes your Falling Crusade enchant on the weapon, which gives you 15%. That's kinda it for the DK talents. You almost never play with Unholy tree. You always go Frost to get those Ascension talents I mentioned. But as for Unholy, there's definitely some talents that you can change and build your own build, but these are kinda the main talents you wanna go. Okay, now let us talk about the glyphs. I'm gonna start with the minor glyphs because in my opinion those three you almost never change. The first one being Glyph of Corpse Explosion. It increases the radius effect by 5 yards. The same is for Glyph of Pestilence. It increases the range effect of it by 5 yards as well. The third one, which is really essential, Glyph of Death's Embrace. Your Death Core refunds 20 runic when used to heal. As I mentioned, you can heal with Death Coil, such as you can heal such targets as your pet, your gargoyle, and more importantly yourself. When you use the talent Lichborn, you can cast Death Coil on you, which will heal you. So why is this talent so important? Death Coil usually uses 40 runic power, and when you use this talent, this glyph, pardon me, it refunds 20. So you heal yourself, you have 40 runic, your runic power will be 20 and not 0. So it can be really helpful when you have like 100 plus runic power, you get more healings. For example, usually when you get 2, you would get 4. So it can be really helpful to heal yourself. Also healing your gargoyle can win you arena sometimes. As for the major glyphs, The first one, there's two kinda, you never switch in the glyphs, the major one, but the third one is usually changed depending on which comp or which team or which enemy that you're about to deal with. The first one that, as I mentioned, does not change is Glyph of the Ghoul. Your ghoul receives additional 40% strength and stamina. It makes your ghoul really tanky and makes your ghoul does way more damage than it usually does. The second one is Glyph of Dark Death. As I mentioned, Death Coil is super essential for single target bursting and to heal yourself. So 15% plus the 15% of this talent makes your Death Coil really strong. The third glyph, which I mentioned, you can switch it around, is Glyph of Diseases. This talent basically makes your Pestilence refresh the dots to their maximum duration, but you can switch this glyph. For example, if you face a team that you don't really need to constantly be spreading dots, you can play with such glyphs as Strangulate, which reduces Strangulate by 20 seconds, which can be really useful. Or the most used one, in my opinion, is Glyph of Anti-Magic Shell. Usually I switch between this and Disease. This is when you face comps that rely heavily on magic damage or rely to kill you when you don't have AMS. So this can be really useful versus caster comps. Disease is really good versus, for example, Warrior Paladin, Warrior Disc, if you want to spread around the dots, or BGs, or I don't know, if you're doing 5 versus 5 with your guild, this can be useful, or world PvP in general. There are also some other glyphs you could use. Such glyphs are Glyph of Chain Ice. It makes your Chain Ice do a bunch of damage when you use it. Usually Chain of Ice does no damage when you use it immediately. It just slows the target and it puts the dot, but with that glyph it can deal about half of the damage that Icy Touch usually does. There's also Glyph of Icy Touch, which makes your Frost Fever disease deal 20% more damage. In my opinion, that glyph can be really important in, for example, BGs or World PvP. If you're fighting like guild versus guild, it makes your Frost Fever do 20% more damage. So imagine you put your Frost Fever on like 15 more targets, all of them are eating more damage. So it can really be helpful in World PvP. There are some other glyphs as well, but in my opinion, those are kind of the most essential. I would recommend only changing Glyph of Diseases to either, as I said, Strangulate, Anti-Magic Shell, or if you're playing BGs or something, you can go Icy Touch. Okay, now let us talk about the macros for DK. DK macros are not so hard in my opinion. There's mainly focus macros and a bunch of pet macros, and that's kind of it. It's not one of those classes that has a bit of a complex macros. It's just your average focus or for pet macros. The first ones, as I talked about, you need to work on your focus. This is not DK related, this is mainly for every PvP class. Focus macros can be used to help you maximize your damage and not waste so much time on targeting different targets. You can use focus for example, chain ice. Here I'm chain icing my main target, which is up next to my character, and the focus is on the bottom right. So let's say I want to slow my main target, and the warrior, for example, this dummy is a warrior, is charging on my healer, and I want to help my healer, so I can slow the warrior while targeting the other person in his team. You can use such macros for focus macros for Death Grip, Chain Ice, Ice Touch, Death Call, Focus. These macros can help you a lot in, as I said, maximizing the damage output. There's also useful macros such as Unholy Presence and Frost Presence that helps you swap your presence just by pressing the one button. These are the only two presents you use on Unholy DK. Unholy Presence when you want to put damage, when you want to chase, when you want to kill the target as fast as possible. Frost Presence is when you're getting hard tunneled by a warrior, a feral, a rogue. It helps you a lot with classes that deal physical damage, and it reduces the damage taken by 8%. So it can help you in that aspect. As for other pit macros you can use, the first one being the stun. I use this macro. I'm going to summon my pet to demonstrate. This macro is basically when my pet is attacking a target, I press it, it will stun the target, and notice it has Pit autocast off for Claw, which makes this ability go off like this. So this, you do that to make sure your Pit hit Gnaw immediately as fast as possible, because if you have this on, as you notice, it's global, it's circling every time the Pit uses Claw, so it can delay the use of Gnaw. So I turn it off when I'm spamming Gnaw to stun my main target, and I use another follow-up macro to this macro, which is this one. It basically turns my Claw on again to maximize my Pit damage, so I press it once after stunning my target and the Claw will be on again. It's really useful to keep this ability on when you're not planning to stun, because your Pit deals a nice amount of damage. I also use such macros as Pit attack, Pit follow, Pit stay. You don't need to macro this, but I find it easier to just keybind it. I have Pit attack, I have Chef 2 on Pit follow. Also, it's important to keybind your huddle for pet. For example, if a warrior is using Blade Storm and you want to save your pet, you simply use huddle. And if you want to cancel the spell, you simply press Pit follow again. There's also Pit leap, you can use it. And there's one more macro you can use for focus, which is basically it turns Claw off and it leaps on your focus. For example, this is my focus right here. This target is my focus. I'm attacking this target and I want to stun this person in order to kill the other target. So this macro goes as like this. Let's say I'm attacking this target, my Pit is also attacking it, but I want to stop the healer from casting, so I spam it and my Pit will jump and stun, and then you can simply Pit follow again. And I'm pretty sure you can also, if you want to make this macro work 100% more efficient, you can spam. Here you can add /pet attack, that your pet attacks the focus target, which makes it, if you noticed when my pet jumped, I'll show it again. When my pet jumped on the off target, it immediately started running back. So what I usually do in a real situation, I Pit follow and then I use the macro to stun my target. But if you're not so fast with making it Pit follow and Pit leap, you can simply make an additional line here to have your Pit attack the focus, which will stop it from running back to your main target. Or you can simply do as I do, Pit follow and then press the button. As for other macros, useful macros you can use, of course there's Corpse Explosion. What this macro does basically, if you're attacking one target, as I said when I was explaining the talents, Pit Explosion is one of your main source of damage. When I press this button, my pet will, if you notice here at the bottom pet bar, my pet will go on stay and it will cast Explode, which deals around 7.6k damage. It's such a huge burst you can use in PvP, and I put Pit Stay because if you cast this spell and you misclick Pit Attack or any other button such as Pit Follow, Pit Leap or anything, it will stop the cast and you will still lose 40 runic power. That's how much the ability costs. So Pit Stay, you use it to avoid confusion, and it makes your Pit stay in one place and it will cast it without being interrupted unless your pits get stunned. There's also useful macros such as Pit Heal. This macro, it's on T for me. When I press it, it immediately summons the pet, and if I press it one more time, it will heal me. And if your pet is summoned, notice the icon switch to the heal and not the pet summon. And if you press it one more time, you will heal yourself. I also added Fell Hellstone because usually I use Pit Heal when I'm about 10k HP. So if you have a Warlock in your team, you can heal about 20k if you don't have any heal reduction on you. Another useful macros is of course Strangulate for focus. Also, if you want to strangulate your main target but you don't have any blood runes, because Strangulate takes blood runes. For example, I'm going to show you now. I don't have any blood runes, my Strangulate is in cooldown, and I need to strangulate this target right now in order to get a kill. So what you can do is Blood Tap reverts any blood rune into death rune, which means you can use it even if it's on cooldown. So if I spam Strangulate, I will Blood Tap first and then Strangulate. You can use such macros if your blood runes are on CD. You can also use this for Chain Ice, Blood Tap Chain Ice, Blood Tap Ice Touch, depending on the situation. DK is a lot situational. It's mainly what's happening in the situation you're in right now and you play from there. But these are kind of the macros for DK. There's nothing complicated, just as I said, the focus macros, a bunch of pet macros. There's also this really useful pet macro versus hunters. What this macro does, basically, it jumps on your party one and then it will stay. I will demonstrate it on me since I don't have anyone in my party right now. What basically happens on this macro is your pet would leap on you and it would stay. Once you do this macro, your pet will leap on your party member and it will stay. Right now it's a bit sloppy because I'm doing it on myself, but if you have a party member, it will leap on the person and it will stay on him. I will show it again. If you face a hunter, you want to scatter and then freeze your partner, what you can do is pit leap and spam stay, and this is how it usually will work. Your pet will sit on your party member and there's around a 50-50 chance you can get the trap. And doing this arena is very satisfying. I've done it before and it can win you games since you eat a 9-second CC for your team. It can be really useful. I think it's only useful versus hunters. Could be useful versus other things, but to be honest, mainly versus hunters. There's also such macros as your pet auto attack on mouse over. You can use that for totems and for if you want to switch your pet to attack someone else in order to slow their cast, since your pet pushes back the cast. And now to the most frequent question I get on my stream: Joris, what add-ons do you use? And I will show you all my add-ons, and I will add a link in the description below which you can press and it will open a Mediafire link for you and you can download all of them. So I'm gonna start with the first add-on, which is called Party Ability Bars, PAB for short. This add-on helps me see the cooldowns of my team. I have one of my friends here with me to demonstrate it. So basically his class is a warrior and it will show the cooldowns for charge, shield bash, shield wall. This helps me know when should I play more passive or when should I play more aggressive, if I should go for a kill, if I should go back. So keeping an eye on your team cooldowns can help you a lot, especially when you have a healer. For example, if you have a priest and his pain suppression is on cooldown, so you need to notice that, oh, my priest can die in this second, I have to peel him till his cooldowns are back up. So you can use this for controlling and keeping an eye on the arena. There's also one add-on I use, it's called Omnibar. This is kind of one of the most important add-ons in PvP. I'm gonna test it now and you will see. Basically what it does here, under my character, you will see that there's a bunch of cooldowns. It basically shows the enemy cooldowns that took place in the arena, or you can also put it in BGs or duels or whatever. I have it strictly for arena, and this add-on can be used to keep an eye on your enemy cooldowns. As I said, your class can peel a lot, help your team a lot, so this type of add-on helps you keep an eye on the enemy cooldowns. There's also a follow-up to it, which is Omni CC. It basically shows the cooldown. For example, if I use both my Icy Touch, here it will show a number 7. Usually it just like shows without a number. This will put a number on it. There's one more useful add-on, it's called Lose Control. What this add-on does, I'm gonna show you right now. I'm gonna remove the test just to show you. If I stun my target, his image will be a stun. It's vice versa for all the people in your team or yourself. Here it shows silence on me. This is just an example, it's a test. It shows, for example, my party is stunned or rooted, I'm silenced, and it also shows for the enemy. For example, when I stun or mind freeze or anything, it will show on the enemy icon. There's also S-Arena. This add-on is basically it's like a simplified Gladius. I'm gonna turn off Lose Control so I can explain this. It's basically like a simplified Gladius. It shows your enemies with their trinkets, but it does not show the DR. So if I use stun and then my partner stuns, you can't see the number, like how long till the stun duration becomes full again. So you can't keep control of the DRs. That's why I would suggest playing with Gladius. I play with this arena because I'm more or less already used to it. This is the most important add-on, Tell Me When. Not really the most important, but I like it so much because I can keep track of all of my trinket procs of I'm gonna remove Horn of Winter, and notice an icon would show on my screen. It's really easy to use. You just put the spell ID like this, put the spell ID, and then you choose enable icon. It's really easy to use. You put it as a buff, show timer, etc. You can put it. I use this add-on to keep an eye on my Horn of Winter. For example, now I don't have it, so it immediately shows in the middle of the screen, which reminds me to use it. It gives 155 strength and agility, so it's really important for you and your team. I also use it to keep an eye on my trinket procs. Notice now when I attack a target, immediately on the top, these are both of my trinkets. They show in the middle of the screen, which tells me that you have trinket procs. You can do maximize damage right now, so I keep an eye on it using this add-on. I also use an add-on that's called TCT. It's simply called TCT. It's here above my pit bar. If you notice at the bottom, there's both of my trinket icons, and it shows how long is left for them to be active again. So in 15 seconds, both of these trinkets will be active again, and I can, for example, keep an eye for if I want to set up like, okay, let's kill the priest right now. I have trinket procs in 3 seconds, so we can kill our target. And I also use Red range. Red range, if you look right now on my bar, it's pretty simple. It's from the name. It shows when I'm not in range to use my spells, they will become red, and the spells that you can still use will remain the same. Also, this G button that I have here, it's called Rocket. It's also in a macro. It's nothing specific. It's just that my rocket is used with taunt, so I just made it like that so it looks cool. And now I'm gonna talk about the rotation. When you're playing a DK, there's not one rotation you usually use. This class is situational. Depending on how the arena is going, you would use your cooldowns and you would use your rotation a bit different depending on the scenario. But I'm gonna summarize it in like a general way is what you usually want to do. The first thing you want to do is, of course, slow your target so you can connect on him. You send your pit to attack. You put both of your dots. If your target can dispel your dots, you immediately have to rush Forte Runic. You can use Scourge Strike to do that, or simply Blood Tap and Death Coil your target, so you can apply Unholy Blight, which means your diseases cannot be dispelled, and make sure that your diseases are up at all time. Your Scourge Strike damage is based on how many diseases are on the target, so if your diseases fall, that means you will do less damage in it. So the key point is to keep your dots up at all time. Use Pestilence when you see a chance that you can cleave more targets. Be careful with using Pestilence because sometimes you can break your team CC. So keep an eye if you're playing with a mage or a warlock that is using Seduce, for example. And also when you're have 60 plus runic bar, you can go for a gargoyle. When you're using gargoyle, make sure you have your trinket procs because that means your gargoyle will do more damage. And as I said, if you don't face an enemy with something that dispel your dots, you don't have to immediately use Death Coil, but I would recommend almost using it always because almost every healer except Druid can remove your diseases, Priest can remove your disease, Pala can remove your disease, and Shamans have a totem which can remove your disease. So I would say immediately rush Death Coil and use Death and DK versus rogues or versus 3 people. If they're all stacked like this, it can be useful. If you're spreading dots, it will help you cleave all the 3 targets together. And keep an eye. As a DK, you're kind of support class. Make sure if your enemy is chasing to slow him, slow this target and slow the 3rd target. Use Runic Empowerment when you think you can have a kill potential. So for example, right now, I would say only use Runic Empowerment when almost all your cooldowns, all your runes are on cooldowns. Like now, would be a good time to use it. If you use it before, you can kind of waste potential damage output, so I would definitely recommend having all your runes on cooldown before using it. So key point is to keep your Unholy Blight on the target, and of course if you spread dots, that means the new target would not have Unholy Blight. That's why you need a focus macro for Death Coil. So let's go, for example, if I make a focus right now and I want to spread dots, I want to hit both targets, I death coil the first target and then I use my focus to death coil both targets. Now both have Unholy Blight, which means both of them cannot be dispelled, so you can maximize your damage. Also, it's important, I forgot to mention this in macros. I also have macros to switch my weapon, of course. For example, as I said, versus certain teams, you will have to use different weapons, even if you have such a good weapon as Shadowmourne. For example, versus Shadow Priest Rogue, you can use Sword Shattering to avoid full disarm. You can also use Spell Shattering that can help you with silence if you face Shadow Priest Mage and they are strictly going on you. This weapon is kind of a must, not been troll, but Spell Shattering, the enchant, is kind of the must. Because if you get 5-second silence, you're in a big danger zone and they can kill you without using any defensive cooldowns. So I would say Shadowmourne when you're maximizing your damage. Let's say I want to start the arena, I have my trinket procs, I want to do as much damage as I can. I see my partner got polyed, so I immediately switch weapon. Middle of the fight, it takes 1 GCD, but it's super important to know when to switch weapons. It can save you arenas. Also, don't forget, this weapon gives me way more resilience, which makes me tankier. As I said, don't be discouraged when you're playing DK. The clash require a lot of practice and you need to keep your eyes kinda open and watch all the what is happening in the arena, learn when to slow and when to grip, try to peel your class as much as possible. Also, one tip I can give is when you're playing with discretion, which almost always, if you notice on the ground right now, there's a little circle that if the enemy goes in it, it will slow them by 50%. So for example, if you're playing versus a warrior and you're kiting around the pillar, don't use all your plague strike on the same spot, because then all the slows would be on the same spot. What I would do is usually hit them once, put a slow on that area of field, and then if they chase me here, I hit them twice. Now we have 2 circles, and then vice versa, do it again, and then you have 3 circles which you can kite around, and it's pretty hard for a class to catch you up when you're kiting properly around your discretion ground slows. And while you're practicing your rotation, keep in mind that your class is situational. You need to understand that sometimes wasting all your runes can be really bad for you, even though you might put some extra damage. But if I use Ice Touch and I use all my Frost runes and my blood type is cooldown and this warrior is killing my partner, I can only grip him, and that would be my only peel option. So I would say definitely try to keep one Frost rune almost up all the time, so play around this. And you can dump one Scorch Strike, but if you see that the enemy is going for a kill, immediately blood tap and slow them, or you can grip as well. Thank you guys for watching. This is my first time making a guide, so I hope it was useful. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below, or you could come watch me on twitch.tv/JorisXTV while I'm streaming. All the add-ons, the macros, and the stream link will be in the description below. Please leave a like and a comment if you would like to see more of these videos.